Hi everyone, thanks for watching my video. I'll start off by telling you how I made these hats. All these hats are not the same size in real life. The husband or chief's hut is larger than the others, and so I use different round objects to draw the lines on the polystyrene to cut them out. After I cut it out, I sand it down, make it nice and even, so it's haven't got those sharp knife marks on it. You can see this one was sanded down before it was painted, and this one was not. Before I paint these hats, I covered it with Cornish adhesive, and I smoothened the adhesive down with a wet brush. And if it cracks, it's a bonus, because that's how most of these huts look on the outside. Here are a few examples, and you can see that they keep the areas surrounding the houses very clean. On the left, I've cut a piece of polystyrene to the shape that I want, and then I put air drying clay over it and cut the edge off at the bottom, and then I use a steel brush to make the grooves in the clay. The roof next to it was painted a dark grey, and later on you will see how I will paint browns and yellows over the grey to make it look like grass. This is a Baobab tree. It's a huge tree, and you find it in the northern parts of South Africa where the Venda live. This is the trunk for the tree that I've cut out of polystyrene, and I've covered it with rubberized bitumen waterproofer. I sealed the polystyrene for the layers of paint that will follow. The bitumen did an excellent job because it left a texture almost exactly like a real Baobab tree's trunk. The branches on top were dead branches from a jacaranda tree that I picked up in the garden. I drilled holes in the bottom of those dead branches and fixed pieces of wire in it, and then glued it with super glue into the branches, and I stuck those wires into the polystyrene. Here you can see where the branches were joined with the polystyrene trunk, and I also painted them with the same bitumen. The gaps that were left between the branches and the trunk were filled up with sawdust and wood glue. Here you can see I painted the thatched roof with reddish browns and yellows to make it more lifelike. In the background you can see the trunk of the Baobab tree that I painted with the Mia hobby paints. It was the buff color. Now over to the clay pots. Clay pots are very important in the Venda village. They preserve everything in it. They cook their food in it. They put it next to a fire. They boil their water in it. They keep their beer in it. They carry their water from the rivers back to the village. I've made these pots from air drying clay, and the holes in the top is where I use the clay tool with a roundish head to make the round holes inside. I painted different motifs on this clay pots. You can soon see on the real photos that these pots are all decorated with different styles of art. In this next clip you will see how the clay pots are very important to these people. These are the hills and rocks that I've tried to replicate for my background for the village. I covered these rocks with a very thin down layer of plaster of Paris, and I used acrylic paint washes, greys. I started off with a grey and then afterwards browns and yellows to make it look interesting. This is the wire tree that I've made, and I've also covered it with the rubberized bitumen because it's very flexible and you can work with it, bend the twigs and the branches in any way and it doesn't break off. I covered the wire branches with this fine twigs you see on the insert. It's the flower trusses from a peppercorn tree. I stuck those twigs onto the wire branches with super glue gel. This tree was made from tinned copper wire. I've learned a couple of lessons about foam. You can see that this foam tears in layers and it's different from the foam you see on the right there. I use it for different purposes. When I grind this up, I use it for clump foliage, or you can use it for leaves on trees, like for instance the Baobab tree. You don't find any sea foam, for instance, in South Africa. So I use these flower trusses of the peppercorn tree and I spray them with spray adhesive because they are very brittle to prevent them from breaking when you stick them onto the trees and work with it. Then you get this weed that you find in the fields. I use it for the acacia trees. It's got straighter branches. And this is a bush with very fine leaves that I find in the field. I dry them out and rub the branches together so the leaves fall off. And I use those for the acacia trees. It's got very fine leaves, but thick canopies, but very fine leaves. I made this acacia tree with these leaves. Before you put these leaves on, you have to cover the branches with a very teased out layer of that polyfiber. Then you cover the polyfiber with a layer of spray adhesive, and then you add your leaves onto that polyfiber. This is a normal cheap blender that I use to grind up all the foam. This foam breaks up in more even smaller pieces than the previous one that I showed you that breaks up into layers. You'll see in the example that the pieces are more even, they're smaller, and I think it's got a great effect for the tree that I've made on the insert. Here's the same tree where I stuck those fine twigs from the flower trusses onto and used the finer foam that ground up more evenly to make that tree. This tree is called a fever tree. It sits on the left front corner of the diorama. You don't see much of it, but it's also an acacia tree with lots of thorns and very fine leaves. It's got a greenish yellowish powder all over the trunk, and I used static grass for the leaves and the thorns. This is my little fire I made. I used 3 LEDs that I rolled up. Those strips can be cut up into 3 LEDs. So I rolled them up and covered it with polyfiber so it doesn't make a harsh light that shines directly into your eyes when you look into the fire. I also covered the LED lights with orange translucent modeling paint. I've added a lot of LEDs on strategic places. The main purpose was to highlight details that would otherwise have gone unnoticed. That's all for now. I'll see you next time.